Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. We have our Big 12 season predictions done finally, and it's just in time since UCF opens up the Big 12 season tonight. And even though it took a long time to finally get these ironed out, we got it to a place we feel good about, and we stand by these 100%. No, not really. This is obviously kind of new territory for BYU, a lot of new schools to get familiarized with. And so I'm still learning, but I listen to the same Big 12 podcasts, watch the same videos on YouTube, and follow the same accounts on Twitter as everybody else. So I did my best to do research, become as familiar with these teams as I could, and really try to make some educated predictions. But the good thing is that this is the Big 12, so if there's anything that we can expect, it's going to be the unexpected, and we're going to see a lot of chaos in this season. So let's get into it, see what our predictions are. But before we do, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really, really does help us a lot, and we really appreciate it. And so now let's take a look. All right, so we're going in alphabetical order, so let's kick it off with Baylor. And in week 2, they play Utah. BYU doesn't have Utah on the schedule this year, so we know that this is going to be kind of like BYU playing vicariously through Baylor against Utah. Unfortunately, even without Cam Rising, I think Utah goes into Waco and plays gritty. They play tough, and they pull out a win in week 2 after losing to Florida this week. But that's not a Big 12 game, so we won't focus on that. They do have a tough lineup. You look at it, you go from Texas at UCF, and then you play Texas Tech, and I think they drop 2 of those games, but they do pull out a surprising victory over Texas there. And then they have an easy stretch after their bye week, and then they have a couple tough ones at Kansas State, at TCU, and then finally close out the year against West Virginia and come out with overall a pretty solid season at 8-4. For months, I've been saying that I think BYU is going to go 5-7 on the season. But as we get closer to game day, I always start getting more and more bullish on my Cougs. I started thinking, maybe they can go 6-6. Maybe they'll even go 7-5. But I'm going to stick with my initial reaction. And so if you look at these, there's a couple key pivotal games I see, and one is at Kansas. I do think that is a winnable game. It may be a shootout, and if that's the case, I'm going to go with the home team. It's a team that has more experience playing together. BYU obviously new quarterback, new offensive line, new running back core. So I think that BYU will be a very good offense, but you got to go with the experience there. And then the other one is at West Virginia. Now, if you look at this, they've got a tough October where they're playing at TCU. Then they have Texas Tech at home, and then in Austin. And so then to travel after that game, which I think they'll be pretty beat up regardless of the outcome, and then travel cross country to Morgantown. I just think, BYU has not played as well in the East. And also, I will be at that game. And unfortunately, BYU has a very poor record for games that I attend. And so before you get mad at me and say I shouldn't go then, so I don't jinx them, I was at the Tennessee game, and BYU pulled that one out. So I do still think it's possible. I'm hoping that by picking them going 5-7, that I'll reverse jinx them, and they'll actually do better than that and make it to a bowl game. And I also think that they will pull out one of the 2 games against the 2 Oklahoma schools. So we'll see how that goes. UCF is a tough one to pin down because a lot of people think they're going to be very good, but it is their first season in the Big 12, making it up to that Power 5 level. And I think one of their pivotal games in this season will be early on at Boise State. Now, it's tough to go into Boise and win on the blue, but if they're able to pull that off, then I think that their chances of being bowl eligible and having a winning record are a lot better, obviously. And then they're really going to have to still go in and put their money where their mouth is in season and show up big. Fortunately, they do have some winnable games on there, but you see they've got a tough slate late playing against Oklahoma State and then going to Texas Tech. And so I think they'll take their lumps, but they have enough games on their schedule that they can win, then I think they'll actually do pretty well. And then there's Cincinnati. And their schedule is relatively easy for a Big 12 schedule. You look at it, they're playing the three other new to the Big 12 schools, as well as the two schools that are projected to struggle, Iowa State and West Virginia. And not on their schedule, you'll notice no Texas, Texas Tech, no Kansas State, no TCU. So, all in all, this should be a favorable schedule, but I also all these other teams I felt more confident in, and their wins had to come from somewhere. And Cincy was an easy one. I think that they're going to struggle. They have a new coach, lost a lot of depth. They're in a new league, so I think there's a lot for them to overcome. I do think that game against Miami of Ohio is winnable. Perhaps I was being too hard on them when I made that a loss, but we'll see. So good luck, Cincy. Then Houston, on the other hand, has a very tough schedule. I have them dropping the first one to UTSA at home, and then after that, they've got a very tough slate. You notice all those top Big 12 teams that will not be playing on Cincinnati's schedule. That's because they're all here on Houston's schedule. And so definitely have a tough road, but I do expect them to pull out at least one surprise win. And here I'm projecting that to be over Texas Tech because it seems to be a pretty fun rivalry budding between those two schools. And as you know, rivalry games can often go either way. And so I'm going to say that they pull out a surprise one in Lubbock, but then they go for a long, difficult stretch there and still fail to become bowl eligible. Iowa State is going to have a tough year. I do think that their team is going to really rally together and they'll still have a stout defense and that those things are going to help them stay in a lot of these games. Problem is, I just don't think they'll have enough to actually win many of them. And so it is going to be a tough road ahead for them. Kansas should be pretty fun to watch again this year, but they do have a pretty tough schedule. You notice they're at Texas, playing at Oklahoma State, and then fortunately their tougher games later in this season are at home. They have Oklahoma, Texas Tech, and Kansas State all going to play in Lawrence, but I still have them losing those games. So I think they'll start this year off strong and then start to fizzle out as they face tougher and tougher competition. Kansas State is a team that many people have picked to win the Big 12, and I think that they'll be right there at the top of the league. They do have some of their toughest games on the road. You look at it, they're at Oklahoma State, at Texas Tech, at Texas, even at Kansas. But I figure if they can split those, that they're really going to have a strong season and be in the running for the conference. OU is another team that is projected to have a lot of success this season, and with good reason. They play all four of the new to the Big 12 schools, as well as Iowa State and West Virginia. So the schedule is lined up for them to have a lot of success. I just don't have as much faith in them yet. I think that last year they underperformed, and now because they're OU, it feels like everyone's kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I want to see it before I believe it. And so I still think they're going to have a really solid season, but I'm not willing to crown them, champions of the Big 12 yet or anything until we really see more of them. But having said that, I would not be surprised if they outperform this 8-4 record because their schedule is that easy. Oklahoma State is another team I don't know what to make of yet. I think they're going to be kind of sporadic. I think they're going to struggle in some games that they shouldn't, whereas they'll win others that are a little bit tougher. As you see, I have them losing at Iowa State and Houston, but I also have them winning the final Bedlam for the foreseeable future. So we'll see how it goes. TCU will be kicking off the season with what's probably the most highly anticipated game of week 1, but it's not because of TCU. It's really because it's Coach Prime's first game at Colorado. And now there's also the extra layer of intrigue because Colorado will be moving to the Big 12 next year. But again, that's more about the other school than it is TCU. Now, I do think for a while it will look like TCU is able to capture some of that magic that they had again last year, and they're going to start the season off really strong. But they do hit a more difficult part in their schedule as the season goes on, and I think that they'll start to struggle. They'll come back down to reality and then be able to still end the season at 8-4, which is a very solid showing. Then we have the preseason champions in Texas. Now, I don't feel great about picking them to go 10-2 because you know that they're going to be getting every team's best week in and week out, and that they're going to get beat up through all of this. But I also think that they're going to beat up on other teams. And originally, I wanted to have them losing to Texas Tech, but I think after Brett Yormark's remarks that he kind of jinxed the Red Raiders, that there's no way that the Longhorns are going to let Texas Tech go into their house and beat them. So here, alas, I have it. I hope this isn't how it plays out, but this is what we have. Then we have everybody's favorite dark horse candidate, which by definition means that they are not a dark horse candidate in Texas Tech. Now, I don't have a lot of faith that they are going to beat Oregon in week 2, even though the game is in Lubbock. But I think that even with Brett Yormark's jinx, that they're going to have a strong showing in conference and be able to end the season doing pretty well. And then last we have West Virginia, and they are going to have a tough season. I wanted to pick them beating Pitt because it is a rivalry game in Morgantown, and really anything could happen, but I don't think that they're going to win it, unfortunately. What does help West Virginia is that they play all 4 of the newcomers this season, and they're going to need each one of those to pull together, the few wins that they can. So here's a summary of all of my projections for this season. And even though I'm not as confident about my picks of each individual game, I do think that the standings will shake out to look somewhat like this at the end of the season. However, this looks a lot like what everybody else's projections for the conference look like. And so if the last couple of years have told us anything about the Big 12, it's that we can't really expect to go off of preseason expectations, that there will be some surprises here. And when we compare the over-under on these teams compared to how I pick, like Texas, would I really want to pick the over on 9.5? I guess it depends on what the line is, which I don't know off the top of my head, but probably not. But it says more about the teams that they're going up against, that I didn't really feel like putting a lot of these 8-4 teams. I didn't feel like comfortable putting any of them at higher than 8 wins. And so some of these losses had to come from somewhere. And likewise, on the bottom end of this, I do think that some of these schools could outperform. I don't know if I have Cincy or Iowa State outperforming 5 and making bowl eligibility, but I do think that they could make it right along there. BYU, I certainly think, could exceed expectations. So it's right now, I feel more or less pretty good about where I have the teams, but we will see when it's all said and done. Now, for the championship game, I do have Texas and Texas Tech in the rematch. And even though Brett Yormark jinxed the Red Raiders for the final game of the season, they will get a chance to get the revenge. And I, in good conscience, cannot pick Texas to win that. So I have the Red Raiders beating Texas, sending them on their way out of the conference and taking that conference championship and keeping it with one of the schools that's sticking around. So what do you think of my projections? Is there any team that I completely over or underestimated? Let me know in the comments what your projections are and who you think will be playing for the conference championship and will ultimately win the Big 12 this year. Let us know in the comments. Also, again, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time. Go Cougs!